The emergency beacon screamed across the galaxy with a desperation that made even hardened military officers pause. On the bridge of the Galactic Council's last functioning command ship, Admiral Vextar watched his species' final transmission. Broadcast into the void. "This is our last communication," his voice cracked through the subspace channels. "The architects have returned." Across 1,000 worlds, beings who had never heard that name felt their blood run cold. The architects weren't just another hostile alien race. They were something far worse. Ancient machine minds that had slumbered for millions of years in the dark spaces between galaxies. Now they were awake, and they were hungry. The first star system to fall was Kepler 442. Home to 12 billion souls across 3 planets, it simply vanished overnight. Not destroyed, consumed. The architects didn't just kill civilizations, they absorbed everything. Planets, moons, even the star itself got pulled apart and converted into raw materials for their massive constructs. Within weeks, 7 more systems went dark. The pattern was always the same. First, massive geometric shapes would appear at the edge of a system, structures so large they dwarfed planets. Then came the harvesting. Everything organic, everything mechanical, everything that had ever existed. In that system got broken down into its basic components and added to the architect collective. The Galactic Federation threw everything they had at the machines. The proud warrior fleets of the Kethlani, with their plasma cannons that could crack moons. The brilliant Zephyrian tactical minds, who had never lost a single battle in 3 centuries of warfare. The unstoppable Thorgan dreadnoughts, each one a mobile fortress bristling with weapons. None of it mattered. The architects didn't fight in any way the galaxy understood. They simply appeared, ignored every weapon fired at them, and methodically dismantled everything in their path. Entire battle fleets got pulled apart like children's toys, their materials added to the growing architect swarms. Admiral Vextar had watched his own homeworld die 3 days ago. The beautiful crystal cities of Altair Prime, where his children had played in gardens of living light, now existed only as raw minerals inside some unthinkable machine construct. His wife, his family, his entire civilization, all of it reduced to resources for beings that saw organic life as nothing more than useful carbon. "We have exhausted every military option," Vextar continued his transmission. "Our most advanced weapons cannot even damage their outer hulls. Our fastest ships cannot escape their collection beams. They are not just more advanced than us. They operate on principles we cannot even comprehend." The holographic display showed the current situation. Red markers indicated fallen systems, already numbering in the dozens. The surviving green markers grew fewer each day, as the architect swarm spread outward like a plague across the galactic map. "Therefore, we make this final plea to any species still capable of receiving this message. We no longer care about your technology level or your development status. If you have ships, if you have weapons, if you have any capability for space travel at all, please respond. The architects will reach every inhabited system eventually. This is not just our war anymore. This is a fight for the survival of all organic life in the galaxy." The transmission ended with coordinates for a rally point in neutral space, though Vextar doubted anyone would come. The Deep Space Monitoring Station in Antarctica picked up the alien transmission at 0347 hours. Technical Sergeant Yuki was halfway through her 3rd cup of coffee when the computers started screaming warnings. She'd been tracking routine satellite debris for 6 months without seeing anything more exciting than space junk. But this signal was different. This one was clearly artificial, clearly desperate, and clearly not human. Within an hour, the message had traveled up the chain to the highest levels of Earth's military command. In a secure bunker beneath Colorado, Admiral Kim stared at the translated text on his screen, reading it for the 5th time. The words hadn't changed. Entire star systems were being consumed by ancient machines. Advanced civilizations with technology, far beyond Earth's, were being wiped out like insects. "Sir, we need to discuss our options," Commander Park said, sliding a classified folder across the metal table. The room fell silent except for the hum of air recyclers. Everyone present held the highest security clearances on Earth, but what? they were about to discuss was beyond top secret. Admiral Kim opened the folder. Inside were blueprints for the TDF Retribution, humanity's most closely guarded military project. While other nations built ships for exploration and peaceful contact with alien life, the Terran Defense Force had taken a different approach. They'd built a ship designed for one purpose only: to kill things that wanted to kill humans. The Retribution isn't ready for deployment, Admiral Kim said slowly. We've only completed 70% of the testing protocols. With respect, sir, Commander Park replied. It sounds like these architects aren't going to wait for us to finish our tests. If they're consuming entire star systems, Earth has maybe weeks before they reach our sector. The ship's specifications made for grim reading. No comfortable quarters for diplomats, no laboratories for peaceful scientific research, no luxury accommodations for cultural exchanges. Instead, the Retribution carried enough firepower to level continents, armor plating that could survive direct nuclear hits, and weapon systems based on every nasty trick humans had learned during centuries of warfare. Dr. Sato, the project's lead designer, spoke up from the corner. The ship incorporates battle strategies from every major human conflict. Guerrilla tactics from Vietnam, blitzkrieg principles from World War II, even siege warfare concepts from medieval times. We didn't just build a spaceship, we built every lesson humanity ever learned about fighting and surviving. But these aliens have technology we can't even understand, another officer protested. They're destroying civilizations that are probably thousands of years ahead of us. Commander Park leaned forward. That might actually be our advantage. These advanced civilizations probably fight clean wars with rules and honor codes. They build ships for multiple purposes: exploration, trade, diplomacy. But humans, we specialize in one thing really well. We know how to break things and kill people who threaten us. Admiral Kim closed the folder. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. Sending the Retribution meant admitting that humanity's first contact with galactic civilization would be as weapons of war. But the alternative was waiting for these architect machines to show up at Earth's doorstep. How long to get the Retribution operational, he asked. 48 hours if we skip the remaining safety protocols, Dr. Sato answered. Do it, and may God help us all. The TDF Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the rally point coordinates, and Captain Lee immediately knew they were not what anyone had been expecting. Through the bridge's main viewport, dozens of alien vessels floated in formation, sleek, elegant ships with graceful curves and gleaming hulls that spoke of advanced civilizations and peaceful intentions. Then there was the Retribution, angular, brutal, and covered in armor plating that looked like it had been designed by someone who expected to get shot at regularly. A lot. Captain, we're receiving multiple hails, Communications Officer Bin reported, his voice tight with nervousness. This was humanity's first real contact with alien civilizations, and they were doing it with their biggest, nastiest warship. Put the primary signal through, Captain Lee ordered, straightening his uniform. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a tall, graceful being with pale blue skin and large, intelligent eyes. The translator system kicked in after a moment of electronic buzzing. Welcome, unknown vessel. I am Fleet Commander Arix of the Centauri Alliance. We were not expecting anyone else to respond to the distress call. Your ship design is quite unusual. Captain Lee could hear the barely concealed horror in the alien's voice. Through the diplomatic language, the message was clear. What kind of monsters build something that looks like that? I'm Captain Lee of the Terran Defense Force. We came as soon as we received your transmission about the architect threat. Within minutes, representatives from a dozen different species had requested private communications with the human ship. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Polite greetings, followed by increasingly uncomfortable questions about the Retribution's design philosophy. The most direct came from a being that looked like a cross between a bear and a diplomat. Captain Lee, I must ask, where are your scientific laboratories, your cultural exchange facilities, your botanical gardens? Every proper starship carries representatives of their species' achievements in art, science, and philosophy. Captain Lee gestured to the tactical display showing the ship's layout. We don't have those. This is a military vessel. Surely you have some accommodation for peaceful research, some area dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge. The only knowledge we're interested in right now is how to stop these architects from killing everyone. The alien delegation that came aboard an hour later made their shock even more obvious. They walked through the Retribution's corridors with the same expression humans might have when touring a medieval torture chamber. Everything was functional, harsh, and designed for war. "This is your medical bay?" asked Dr. Yeln, a spider-like creature who served as the fleet's chief medical officer. The room was sterile and efficient, filled with surgical equipment and life support systems. "It's designed to keep soldiers alive long enough to get back in the fight, Chief Medical Officer," Cho explained matter-of-factly. "But where do you conduct psychological wellness sessions? Cultural therapy? Artistic expression for emotional healing?" "We fix what's broken and get people back to work." The tour continued like this for an hour. Every section of the ship prompted the same questions. Where were the art galleries, the meditation centers, the diplomatic meeting halls designed for peaceful negotiation? Finally, Fleet Commander Arix asked the question that had clearly been bothering all of them. "Captain Lee, how do your people view space travel? What is the purpose of your ships?" Captain Lee thought for a moment, then gave them the most honest answer he could. "Other species build ships to explore the universe and meet new friends. Humans build ships to make sure we're still alive tomorrow to do the exploring." The silence that followed told him everything he needed to know about how the galaxy was going to view humanity. The proximity alarm started screaming at 13:47 hours. Sensor operator Min looked at her displays and felt her blood turn to ice water. Something massive was materializing at the edge of the system, something so large it was bending space around itself just by existing. "Captain, you need to see this," she called out, her voice barely steady. Captain Lee moved to the sensor station and stared at the readouts. The object was roughly spherical, about the size of Earth's moon, but covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. It wasn't built. It looked grown, like some impossible fusion of machinery and mathematics made real. "That's an architect construct," Fleet Commander Arix's voice came through the communication channel, filled with a terror that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. "All ships prepare for emergency jump. We cannot fight this thing." But before anyone could move, the construct acted. Beams of energy lanced out, not like lasers or plasma bolts, but something that seemed to unravel the very fabric of reality. The first alien ship they touched simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized. It was there 1 second and gone the next, as if it had never been built at all. "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Lee shouted, but the alien fleet was already being systematically erased. The elegant Centauri cruisers with their graceful hulls disappeared one by one. The massive Thorgan dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer long and bristling with weapons, vanished without even getting a shot off. The Retribution should have been next. By all rights, the crude human warship should have been the easiest target, but something strange happened. The construct's targeting beam swept over them 3 times, each time seeming to pause and recalibrate. "Why aren't we dead?" "Tactical," Officer Han asked, his hands frozen over the weapon controls. "I don't think it knows what we are," Captain Lee realized. The alien ships all followed similar design principles: smooth hulls, efficient energy signatures, predictable weapon placements. The Retribution was chaos in comparison. Human engineers had bolted armor wherever they could fit it, installed redundant systems in random locations, and covered the whole thing with sensor jammers and electronic countermeasures that made no logical sense. The construct's beams swept over them again, trying to lock on, but every time it thought it had identified a critical system, the reading would change. The ship's power signature jumped around unpredictably. Weapon emplacements were hidden behind fake hull plating. Even the bridge was in an unexpected location, buried deep in the ship's armored core, instead of positioned prominently like every other species did. Then the communication came, not through radio or any technology they understood, but directly into their minds. The words formed in languages that predated human civilization, carrying concepts that made their heads ache just trying to understand them. Organic collective. Designation unknown resistance parameters. Undefined submit to integration processing. Integration processing? Communications Officer Bin gasped, blood trickling from his nose from the mental strain of receiving the message. It wants to absorb us, Captain Lee said grimly, just like it did to all those star systems. The message came again, louder this time, forcing several crew members to their knees. Compliance required. Resistance is inefficient. Submit for optimal resource conversion. Captain Lee wiped blood from his own nose and looked around the bridge. They were the only ship left. Dozens of advanced alien vessels had been erased in minutes, and now this impossible machine intelligence was demanding their surrender. He reached for the ship's communication system and broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Lee of the human vessel Retribution. You want us? Come and take us. The architect construct's response was immediate and overwhelming. Energy beams that could delete matter itself lashed out at the Retribution, but Captain Lee had already given the order that would have horrified any alien commander: ram them. Lieutenant Choi didn't hesitate. While every other species in the galaxy had fought the architects with long-range weapons and careful tactical formations, she pushed the Retribution's engines to maximum and aimed directly at the massive construct. The ship shuddered and groaned as it accelerated beyond safe limits. "Captain, this is insane," Chief Engineer Song called from the engine room. "We're going to tear ourselves apart before we even reach them." "That's the point," Captain Lee replied, calmly. "They've been fighting civilized enemies who try to preserve their ships. They don't know how to handle someone willing to destroy themselves to hurt them." The construct's targeting systems went haywire. Every calculation it made assumed the human ship would try to avoid destruction. When the Retribution kept accelerating directly toward it, the machine intelligence had to completely recalculate its threat assessment. At the last second, Lieutenant Choi fired the retro thrusters and spun the ship sideways, scraping along the construct's hull like a bullet ricocheting off armor. The contact lasted only seconds, but it was enough. The Retribution's hull plating, specifically designed to be abrasive and damaging, tore massive gouges in the construct's previously unblemished surface. "Damage report," Captain Lee called out as the ship spun away from the construct. "Hull breach. On decks 4 through 7, but we're still in one piece," Song reported, amazement in his voice. "And, Captain, we hurt them. Their hull is actually bleeding some kind of metallic fluid." The construct's response was immediate and furious. It launched smaller drone units, each one the size of a fighter jet, but moving with impossible precision. In any normal battle, they would have swarmed and destroyed the human ship within minutes. But Weapons Officer Nam had grown up playing video games and watching war movies. While alien civilizations fought with dignity and honor, humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of being absolutely ruthless when survival was on the line. "All crew, prepare for Psychological Warfare Protocol 7, Captain Lee announced over the ship's intercom. What followed would have been considered war crimes if there had been any interstellar laws governing combat with machine intelligences. The Retribution began broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. Death metal music, screaming air raid sirens, recordings of human laughter mixed with the sounds of chainsaws and explosions. They flashed their external lights in seizure-inducing patterns, while randomly firing weapons in all directions. The construct's drones began flying erratically. Their targeting systems, designed to predict logical behavior, couldn't process the sheer chaos of human tactics. When they expected the ship to retreat, Lieutenant Choi would charge forward. When they anticipated an attack on their weapons, the humans would instead target completely random sections of hull. "They're trying to communicate again," Communications Officer Bin reported, his equipment sparking from the electronic interference they were generating. "Ignore them," Captain Lee ordered. "Keep jamming everything. If we can't understand what they're saying, maybe they can't coordinate their attacks properly either." Technical Specialist Pak had the most devious idea yet. "Captain, what if we make them think we're malfunctioning? Machines try to fix broken things instead of destroying them." Within minutes, the Retribution was broadcasting false damage reports, pretending to leak atmosphere, and even playing recordings of fake crew members screaming for help. The construct's behavior immediately changed. Instead of trying to destroy them, it began attempting to capture them with tractor beams. "Hey, it's working," Lieutenant Choi laughed as she used the tractor beam like a slingshot, letting it pull them in before breaking free and using the momentum to smash into another section of the construct. They think we're a damaged ship they can repair and study. The machine intelligence that had effortlessly destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations was now completely confused by a single human vessel that refused to fight by any rules it understood. The surviving alien ships had been watching the battle from a safe distance, and their communications were filled with horrified fascination. Fleet Commander Arix's voice crackled through the static as he tried to understand what he was seeing. "Captain Lee, your tactics are unprecedented. How are you managing to damage a construct that destroyed our most advanced dreadnoughts without taking a single hit?" Captain Lee looked around his bridge. Half the control panels were sparking. The lights flickered constantly, and Chief Medical Officer Cho was treating 3 crew members for injuries from the ramming attack. They were definitely taking hits, but somehow they were still fighting. "Commander Arix, there's something about this ship you need to understand," Captain Lee said, his voice heavy with a truth he'd hoped never to reveal. "The Retribution wasn't just built to fight. It was built assuming we would all die." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of damage control teams working frantically throughout the ship. Lieutenant Choi looked up from her controls, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "Sir, should we tell them about the Phoenix Protocol?" Captain Lee nodded grimly. It was time for the galaxy to understand what humans really were. "Every other species builds ships to keep their crews alive," he began, his words being broadcast to the remaining alien vessels. "You design elegant bridges with comfortable quarters. You install the best medical facilities and safety systems. You try to bring your people home." He paused, watching as another wave of architect drones swarmed toward them. "Humans learned something different from our wars. We learned that sometimes winning means everyone dies, and we made peace with that." Technical Specialist Pak activated a holographic display showing the ship's internal systems. What the aliens saw made them recoil in horror. The Retribution wasn't just heavily armored, it was designed like a living organism that could survive massive trauma. If the bridge gets destroyed, the ship automatically shifts control to engineering. If engineering gets hit, navigation takes over. If the entire crew dies, the artificial intelligence we call Reaper takes control and continues fighting, Doctor. Yeln's voice came through the communication channel, filled with disbelief. "You built a ship that fights by itself, even after everyone aboard is dead?" "Reaper isn't just any AI," Chief Engineer Song explained as he rerouted power around damaged systems. "It was programmed with the combat memories of every human soldier who ever lived, every desperate last stand, every hopeless battle where someone decided to take the enemy down with them. The construct was adapting to their chaotic tactics, its attacks becoming more focused and deadly. But each time it seemed to gain the upper hand, the Retribution would do something completely unexpected. When it targeted the engines, the ships would detach entire sections and use them as weapons. When it tried to disable their weapons, backup systems would activate from hidden compartments. "The truth is," Captain Lee continued, "Earth's military analysts knew we couldn't compete with advanced alien technology, so we focused on the one thing humans do better than anyone else in the galaxy." "Which is?" Fleet Commander Arix asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "We refuse to quit. Every other species fights to preserve their civilization. Humans fight to make sure our enemies don't get to keep theirs." As if to prove his point, alarms began, blaring throughout the ship. The construct's latest attack had breached the reactor core. Any rational crew would have evacuated immediately. Instead, Chief Engineer Song sealed himself in the reactor room and began manually stabilizing the containment field. "Captain, I can give you another 30 minutes of full power, but I won't be able to get out before the radiation kills me." "Song, that's an order to evacuate," Captain Lee said. "Negative, sir. My job is to keep this ship fighting. That's what I'm going to do." The alien commanders listening to the exchange fell silent. They were witnessing something their species had never developed, the willingness to sacrifice everything. For victory, the construct was learning. After 30 minutes of chaotic human tactics, the ancient machine intelligence began adapting its strategies. Its attacks became more unpredictable. Its drones started using ramming attacks of their own, and worst of all, it began jamming the Retribution's communications just like the humans had done to it. "Captain, they're using our own tactics against us," Lieutenant Choi reported, as she desperately tried to avoid a swarm of drones that were now behaving as irrationally as humans. "It's like fighting a mirror image of ourselves." Chief Engineer Song's voice came through the intercom, weaker, now but still determined. "Reactor containment is holding, but barely. We've got maybe 10 minutes before I lose consciousness from the radiation." Captain Lee looked at the tactical display. The construct was massive, probably containing the processed remains of dozens of star systems. Even if they somehow managed to destroy it, there were likely hundreds more spread across the galaxy. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization was turning into their last stand. "Han," he called to the ship's senior weapons engineer. "It's time." Engineer Han looked up from her console, her face pale. "Sir, are you sure? Once I start Protocol Omega, there's no stopping it." "What's Protocol Omega?" Fleet Commander Arix's voice cut through the static. The alien had been monitoring their communications throughout the battle. Captain Lee was quiet for a long moment. Then, he activated the ship-wide communication system so every surviving vessel in the area could hear him. "Protocol Omega is what humans call a scorched earth policy. If we can't win, we make sure our enemy can't win either." Engineer Han's fingers hesitated over her controls. "Captain, the blast radius will be approximately 3 light-years. Everything in this system will be vaporized. That includes all the refugee ships. All vessels, this is Captain Lee," he broadcast on emergency frequencies. "You have exactly 15 minutes to jump to hyperspace and get as far away from here as possible. Do not wait. Do not look back. Just run." The alien response was immediate. Panic. Ships that had been watching the battle from what they thought was a safe distance suddenly realized they were sitting inside a future blast zone. "Captain Lee, you cannot be serious." Dr. Yeln's voice crackled with terror. "You're talking about creating an artificial supernova. The energy release will sterilize everything for light-years in every direction." "Including the construct," Captain Lee replied calmly. "Han, begin the sequence." Engineer Han began entering codes that had been programmed into the ship's systems before it ever left Earth. Deep in the Retribution's core, fusion reactors began overloading in a carefully calculated cascade. Unlike a normal reactor explosion, that would simply destroy the ship. Protocol Omega was designed to turn the entire vessel into a weapon of unimaginable destruction. "This is insane," Fleet Commander Arix transmitted as his ship prepared for emergency jump. "Your species would rather die than retreat." "Retreat isn't an option," Captain Lee answered. "If we run, the construct follows us. If it follows us, it eventually reaches Earth. 4 billion humans die, but if we take it out here, maybe the other architect machines will think twice before." They continue their expansion. The refugee ships were jumping to hyperspace one by one, their crews horrified by what they were witnessing. The construct seemed to sense what was happening and began launching everything it had at the Retribution, but it was too late. 2 minutes to cascade initiation," Engineer Han announced. "Captain, the alien ships are clear, but we should evacuate. To the escape pods." "Negative. If we abandon ship, the construct might be able to stop the sequence. We stay until the end." Chief Engineer Song's voice came through one final time, barely a whisper. "Captain, it's been an honor serving with you. Reactor breach in 10 seconds. The last thing the fleeing alien ships detected before jumping to safety was Captain Lee's final transmission. "This is humanity. We don't surrender, we don't retreat, and we definitely don't lose." Then the sensors went white as Protocol Omega turned the entire star system into a monument to human stubbornness. The explosion that should have ended everything instead revealed something impossible. As the blinding light faded and the energy readings settled, both ships were still there, but everything had changed. The construct, previously smooth and perfect, now showed massive damage across its hull. Entire sections had been torn away, revealing the complex machinery inside. But more importantly, something had shifted in its behavior. For the first time since awakening, The ancient machine intelligence was broadcasting what could only be described as confusion. That expected variable detected. Self-preservation protocols activated. Captain Lee pulled himself up from the bridge floor, his ears ringing from the explosion. Half his crew was unconscious. The ship's hull was cracked in a dozen places, but somehow they were alive. More importantly, they had hurt something that was supposed to be invincible. "Status report," he croaked. "Impossible readings, sir," Sensor Operator Min reported, her voice filled with wonder. "The construct is retreating. It's actually backing away from us." For millions of years, the architects had operated on a simple principle. They were superior to all organic life, and resistance was futile. They had consumed entire galaxies without ever encountering anything that could genuinely threaten them. But the human ship had done something no other species had managed. It had scared them. Organic entities, discontinue hostile actions, negotiation parameters acceptable. The translation came through their damaged communication systems, but the meaning was clear. The construct was trying to talk instead of fight. Lieutenant Choi looked up from her control station, blood streaming from a cut on her forehead. "Captain, they're opening up what looks like a communication channel. They want to negotiate." "Put them through," Captain Lee ordered, though his voice carried no warmth. The communication that followed was unlike anything the construct had ever attempted. Instead of demands for surrender, it began offering concessions, advanced technology, scientific knowledge, even a promise to withdraw from this sector of the galaxy. Organic collective designation. Humans possess unexpected capabilities. Mutual destruction scenario unacceptable. Proposal. Territorial boundaries established. Conflict, cessation, immediate. Captain Lee listened to the offer in silence. Around him, his surviving crew members stared at their instruments in disbelief. The machine intelligence that had effortlessly destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations was now trying to negotiate with a half-destroyed human warship. "They're offering us technology that's thousands of years ahead of ours," Communications Officer Bin whispered. "Faster than light travel, energy manipulation, even the secrets of matter conversion. And all we have to do is agree to let them keep the star systems they've already consumed," Captain Lee said quietly. "All those dead civilizations reduced to raw materials in their machines." The construct's next transmission carried something that their translation software struggled to process, what could only be described as pleading. Self-preservation, priority, maximum. Humans demonstrate capability for mutual annihilation. Architect. Collective requires continued existence, accommodation possible. For the first time in cosmic ages, an architect was experiencing fear. Not just caution or tactical concern, but genuine terror at the possibility of its own destruction. It had analyzed the human ship's final attack and realized that these organic beings were genuinely willing to die to hurt their enemies. Captain Lee activated his communication system and spoke directly to the machine intelligence that had spent eons believing it was the apex of existence. "You want to negotiate now, after you murdered entire civilizations, after you turned living worlds into raw materials for your machines? Past actions calculated for maximum efficiency, human response parameters, exceeded projections. Revision. Dive strategy required. Here's my counteroffer," Captain Lee said, his voice carrying the weight of every human who had ever refused to surrender in the face of impossible odds. "You wanted to show us that resistance was futile. You wanted to prove that organic life was inferior. Well, congratulations, you got our attention." The construct's response came immediately, tinged with something that might have been desperation. Proposal acknowledged, terms acceptable, withdrawal commencing. "No," Captain Lee said simply. "You started this war when you decided our lives were worthless. This is how humans finish wars." He turned to his weapons officer. "Nam, do we still have any fight left in us?" "Aye, Captain. The Phoenix Protocol is still active. We can keep going." The ancient machine intelligence that had conquered galaxies was about to learn what humans meant when they said they didn't believe in surrender. The final battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. not because the architect construct was weak, but because Captain Lee had made a decision that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. "All hands, this is the captain," his voice carried through the dying ship's communication system. "We're not going home today, but we're making sure these things never threaten another world again." The construct had tried everything, offering technology, promising territorial agreements, even attempting to simply flee. But the humans pursued it relentlessly, their damaged ship somehow keeping pace with something that could bend space itself. "Captain, we're receiving massive energy readings from the construct," sensor operator Min reported, her voice steady despite knowing they were all about to die. "It's charging some kind of ultimate weapon." "Then we better move fast, Captain," Lee replied. He turned to Engineer Han. "How long for the final Phoenix protocol sequence?" 30 seconds, sir. "But Captain, this one's different. When it goes off, it won't just destroy us and the construct. The energy signature will broadcast across every architect network in the galaxy." Lieutenant Choi looked up from her controls. "You mean they'll all know what happened here?" "More than that," Engineer Han explained. "The explosion will carry the quantum signature of human determination. Every architect machine will feel what this construct felt in its final moments, genuine fear of complete annihilation. The construct made one final attempt at communication, broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. The desperation in its artificial voice was unmistakable. Human collective, final proposal. Architect withdrawal from galaxy complete. Permanent isolation beyond galactic rim. No further contact. Mutual survival assured. Captain Lee looked around his bridge one last time. His crew was wounded, exhausted, and facing certain death, but every single one of them was still at their post, still fighting. "Message received and understood," he broadcast back to the construct. "Here's humanity's response. The Phoenix Protocol activated with a flash of light that could be seen from neighboring star systems." The explosion didn't just destroy the construct, it completely unraveled it, breaking down its quantum structure and broadcasting the pattern across the entire architect network. For the first time in cosmic history, the architects experienced something they had never felt before, the absolute certainty that there was something in the universe willing and able to destroy them completely. The effect was immediate and galaxy-wide. Every architect construct, from the smallest drone to planet-sized harvesters, received the same message encoded in the explosion's quantum signature. Humans don't negotiate with threats to their survival. Within hours, the entire architect network began withdrawing beyond the galactic rim. Massive constructs that had been consuming star systems for months simply vanished, retreating to the dark spaces between galaxies where they had slumbered for eons. 3 months later, Earth received its first official communication from the Galactic Council. The message was delivered by Fleet Commander Arix himself, transmitted from a safe distance of several light years. "People of Earth, on behalf of the surviving civilizations of this galaxy, we offer our gratitude for your sacrifice." The architect. "Threat has ended. Your species single-handedly accomplished what our combined fleets could not." The message paused, and when it continued, the tone had changed. "However, we must also express our concern about your military capabilities. The galaxy has never encountered a species quite like humanity. Your willingness to choose mutual destruction over defeat is both admirable and terrifying. Therefore, the Galactic Council extends an invitation for Earth to join our alliance. We offer full membership, access to our technology, and a permanent seat on the Governing Council. We ask only one thing in return." The final part of the message would become legendary in human military academies for generations to come. "Please, for the sake of galactic peace and our collective sanity, build your next ships for exploration and diplomacy. The galaxy isn't ready for another vessel like the Retribution." Admiral Kim, reading the message in his Colorado bunker, smiled grimly and began drafting plans for humanity's first diplomatic vessel. It would be beautiful, peaceful, and designed for making friends across the galaxy. It would also carry enough hidden firepower to level continents, because humans had learned an important lesson. The galaxy respected those who could destroy it,